Hey everyone, RemanX here, and it's taken me a little while to get my thoughts together to be able to really go over what's going on with an economy within Marvel Strike Force. If you guys don't know, I have worked extensively for years on working on economies in video games and understanding them to a great degree. And when I was building my own game in the past, this was my number one priority was, product management slash the progression elements in the game and monetization to understand how to make it a fine balance. And I'll say you that's to you very, very clearly, it's probably one of the hardest things to do when you talk about video games is to have a robust economy that allows everybody to feel like they're actively participating without overly diminishing their contributions to the game. So when Marvel Strike Force came out, and again, this is like one-on-one basis of gameplay and core loops. There were some core loops. Now, these are the things you do either every day, you do long-term for progression or resource management. Again, these are all the loops that you do that are part of the gameplay. Loop is something you continually do to progress. And so the first one was daily core loop, which was basically log in, get your energy, spend extra cores energy. You would use the energy to battle in the campaign modes, get resources, and then upgrade characters. That's a very simple way to look at it. So daily rewards, all that stuff contributed to that. Then there was a resource management, which you basically had to understand like what characters to bring up that were valuable. The reason why you did that is because maybe campaigns were different. You had to have a certain number of characters to be able to push the villain campaign or the hero campaign. In later game modes, it became more specific. And each time you did that, you were able to manage your resources by not over allocating to something that would stop you from progressing elsewhere. Which, remember, this is important. Talk about over allocation. Then you have the character progression loop, which is really just about obtaining the shards, growing that character through the normal gear and stars, which eventually became red stars, and etc. And you increase that power to be able to overcome harder and harder challenges. And then the competitive loop that happened was, there was raids, war, and events. And this is when the game was launched. Most of this stuff was here, and it really didn't change much for years until they started adding more game modes. Now, as a game progresses and they introduce more and more game modes, they become part of what you would call the core modes. Now, these core modes are things that are persistent modes that are considered to be how they allocate the resources in the core loops so that you know consistently where things are coming from. Now, this was directly taken from Marvel Strike Force's most recent economy post. So what this is it basically lets us kind of see how they're planning to adjust the economy inside the game and help us understand our role and what we need to do and how we need to build. And so one of the things I want to talk about is, it's pretty clear Battle World with the ISO rewards, talked about some of them from the elite nodes, but mostly character shards, really, for whatever character is in there. The Cosmic Crucible, which is your, now T4 in red stars and diamonds. Again, we'll revisit that in a minute as well. War has become the best source for ISO, and now when they've added a new war tech, and you're going to see a ton of power cores as you progress through the war tech. And then raids, which is going to be the gear, which really hasn't changed much over time. Daily objectives, gold. Now, that used to be something that was primarily found inside of your core loop that you're spending energy on. Campaign nodes, those were really that was your best way to kind of continue through that. And there was a lot more in Blitz, etc. Now, Blitz has the shop credits here. And then Arena has training modules. So I'm not necessarily upset about that. I do think that there's something missing where there's probably a new game mode coming down the road to help us, cover for some of the new stuff coming to the game from a progression standpoint. But what I want to talk about is why this had to happen, and our part in it, and Scopely's part in it, and really just this is important to understand. When games make these changes, they make them based on player behaviors. All right, they make them based on the fun factor. So when you're participating in something and having fun, they'll lean into it, hopefully, and make sure it's rewarding. Now, this is the big key, is make sure it's rewarding enough that your time spent invested in it is worth what you're getting out of it. So when we're looking at that specifically, so I think towers will probably be in here as more of like the character unlocks, and there's probably one more coming too. So we'll probably get towers. I don't know the towers are going to 100% stay. I'm worried that they aren't really well received because they're a little bit convoluted and a little harder to get for players to understand what's happening. So, how often do they repeat? What characters do you bring for them? What's required? So, what this says is that pretty much you can't skip teams, although there might be some you can skip, but I'll revisit that when I go in deeper at the end of this. But what we're going to find is there's a lot more of this from supplemental event flow, which is things like your special events in the game. And that's really been kind of the windfall for a majority of the currency over time. So this was like the remaining currency left in August. And, they've really said the core modes are critical, but supplemental events now provide the majority of high level rewards, requiring diversified participation for optimal progression, which means don't skip teams, right? That's what they're saying to you, like right there. Now, skipping teams is different than overbuilding teams. And trying to understand the baseline of what power level they're looking at to overcome the base challenge is the problem I've been really struggling with, but I'm going to give you some insight to what they're thinking. I'm going to tell you what I think about that, and I'll give you my take on the current economy, on why it's not quite there yet. So most rewards come from events, and then they have the flexibility, they do, to adjust rewards over time. So if you think about it, we went away from this where we were farming these core loops, spending energy inside of campaign modes. Now, there's two things that happened. One, as players, we started hoarding energy. And what we did was we hoarded the energy with the idea that we were going to, use the energy for special events or for level up so that you quickly leveled up and you were able to bypass it because and to be fair, they hadn't updated the campaign in quite some time. So there was a significant potential reason, at least for many people in their mind, to hoard energy. Now, if you were a free-to-play or a light spender, that was probably bad in a way because you were unfortunately not getting the training mats and gold that you would get from just the base participation in the hard modes. Those hard modes were there, and while they weren't a significant allocation by default, by spending your resources, you were able to overcome a lot of the lack of resources from gold, etc., that were in the events that may have varied from month to month. And so it was almost as if they wanted to say, hey, guys, go back to spend your energy, but they never really gave us reason to. Or if they did, they gave us those FOMO moments where if we spent the energy, we got massive rewards, and then, oh, geez, I better hoard my energy again so I can get those massive rewards next time this thing comes around. And that was through leaderboards, etc. So they really had a poor management of that overall because there really wasn't incentivization to do that. So when they consolidated the stores, it was part one of the massive rework because having all those currencies out there allowed for multiple disasters for events when they didn't reset the currency when a new event came up and you're like, whoa, that guy just finished all those milestones. I mean, it was great when we got, compensation, but I'm going to say this, in an economy like Marvel Strike Force, you never get real compensation. It's an illusion. It's a placebo. Okay. It's the sugar pill they tell you to make you feel better about whatever happened to you in that moment because they're just going to allocate it differently later on. So it was never really like we're getting more stuff. Although sometimes it did break the dam open when it came to like G14, G15. So that was good because, that moment they had to adjust for that because 14 and 15 was so far behind at that point when they made the issue with the orb gate when everybody had those orbs that like happened in that small window of time zone when the people were able to claim that crazy missing comma or decimal point, whatever you want to say, Jeff. Anyway, so moving on from that. So we're in a different era. So it's going to be interesting to see this. So one of the things you always want to do is say, what does Marvel Strike Force sell us that gives us an indication about what they think is the minimum base requirement for characters in the new economy. And when we look at this, periodically we'll get character offers that showcase the actual base power level. And so we're going to talk about this. They put the Eternals in here. And they put the two OG Eternals in here for it was like $24.99 for Gear Tier 18. And my problem with Gear Tier 18 is it really doesn't allow you to overcome many challenges anymore. You know, you can see like this now is GG20, etc., etc., etc. You can see how they're kind of moving towards that, but obviously that's those characters there. Eternals was the one that was like in there the most. So from a value perspective, it seems like they're missing the boat on allocation. So I'll tell you right now, as a predominantly free-to-play light spender who specifically, you know, only impulse buys very rarely, this type of offer showcases the disconnect from where I think we should be to where they think we need to be, and how the actual game is designed for most players as you progress. So $24.99, these guys would be hardly functional in the towers, etc., as you built them. I tried them at G18 with 4 of the Eternals and found them significantly lacking in just the hard mode alone, while G19 became a lot more feasible with the stat increase from that. So usually when you're designing curves about progression and the progression elements, you usually have an idea about the period that you're going to limit access to people who didn't spend. And then you'll have different tiers based on how much they spend. And it's important to kind of understand that those guardrails have to kind of be removed. Otherwise, that gap grows significantly and you can't build content around people's rosters easily. So, on my roster, you're going to see I don't have a lot of characters at gear tier 110 or level 110. Level 110 is a significant bonus. It is probably, at a 5-level increase, one of the most powerful increases we've seen. And then coupled with the ability to do this 0.5 unique piece, you're seeing massive increases in power just from the leveling bonus. But, you know, at 13 million base plus the equipping the piece, you know, it's a significant investment in gold. So what that's done is it's added the value to the passes. So Marvel Strike Force has made it so that the biggest pain point in the game has been being able to acquire character shards from events and then to upgrade them well enough so they could overcome the challenges in the towers to gain more character shards, etc., etc. So the pain has induced a lot of people, and again, right now, those passes are at their best value because of how they're impacting content. Many players who used to spend $400 a week are now spending $80 a month just buying those passes, and are using the seasonal store as a supplement for gaining the shards that they would have normally spent money on. So the seasonal store has had a massive impact on this, and they really haven't updated this in a way that makes a ton of sense. And as free to play, I've often had to just, you know, make the decision to go in here and get these characters from this in this way. And the base unlock doesn't get me very much. I do struggle a little bit in the current raid, even at 110, because of the fact that the star level is obviously just the distance has really grown from the content in the challenge way. However, I do think as time goes on, they can make adjustments to that so that it doesn't feel like you're so far behind, either by giving us more. So when a new element comes out like Orange ISO, and you saw the stats from the Orange ISO that came out today, they can give us more, so it feels like it's better. However, I did some math. I don't want to share this with you because there's some stuff that I use for my work I would hate for somebody to try to copy. And we're probably about 80 million to 110 million a month behind being able to pivot into 105 and have a few characters at 110 when new teams come out. And you can see that, the last two new teams that have come out, I've done that, but you've seen I've had to make sacrifices. I cannot build my Dread team, etc. So I don't like skipping teams, but on occasion, if they're not an impact, and then I reduce my ability to pivot when like a tower comes out, and I need that to overcome the challenge. So I do think there needs to be some level of intervention coming soon. I am worried that the economy can be left too long where the gap is so far that people just get overly frustrated and dial out of the game. We're seeing that happening on small scales right now. And I hope that we continue to see more transparency. That post, in retrospect, was very, very well done and gave us a good idea about how to draw conclusions about what we need to do. But again, with the fact that I can't identify characters that have the highest value at 105 and easily make 110 changes, we're seeing Amazing Avengers I shouldn't have to manual those nodes with the amount of power I've invested in them. So, all right, RemanX signing out. I didn't have a lot more content going in here. You get game developer perspectives from somebody who's worked in the industry. You're going to get a lot more high profile game and team reviews from me. I'm going to do my next one is going to be on the most recent raid team that was announced, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on why it's not as bad as people think, providing that certain stats are adhered to. So, again, I do things so you don't have to, and now I'm free to play, so you can spend. Later.